August 16th, 2025. Well, we got the big meeting between President Trump and President Putin in, of all places, uh, Elmendorf-Richardson Joint Base near Anchorage, Alaska. And this much fun meeting, which I covered 2 videos ago in a lead up, kind of putting out what I thought was going on with it. And it looks like it came off so-so. I mean, obviously, the expectations that some people were raising obviously weren't met. That is, the people that this would immediately lead to a ceasefire and the immediate end of the conflict. And obviously, I don't think that at all came out of this. No hint of that. And obviously, it apparently went well enough that Trump didn't walk away, or and I didn't think that was going to happen anyhow. I don't think he wanted to let that happen. Of course, I have my own sort of slant on what's really going on, and because there's a lot of forces that are moving and trying to manipulate Trump into doing certain things, which I don't think he really wants to do, because I don't think he thinks it would be a good thing. And of course, I'm following the coverage, particularly a lot of it on Fox. I was like, you guys are really living in an alternate reality. You're not really tuned into what the reality actually is. I'm kind of hoping that somehow maybe this meeting alone maybe conveyed that Trump does know what's going on now, I hope. Some of the statements he makes isn't, but that may be what you're supposed to say when you're president and your intelligence community is feeding that stuff, and it's like, do you really want to argue about these things? But I think it's hopeful that maybe the war might be heading toward an end. I think even the battlefield aspects, the Russians are advancing, and they're really, going on Pokrovsk and several other areas. And the Russians have been really advancing quite a bit in the last several days, particularly. And of course, I think that they've kind of outlined what they want territorially. They want to complete Luhansk and Donbass Oblast, and they want at least, I think, what they've taken in Zaporizhia and Kherson. So I think that when they talked about the land swaps, it's hard to know how far they got into that, but I think those areas, such as the Sunni area and the area around Belgorod and those areas, I guess, Kharkiv, Oblast as well. Those are the areas which I think that Russia would be willing to trade for the areas they haven't yet conquered in Donbass, particularly. And I think, and this is just me guessing, the smart thing at any rate would be that there'd be no penetration across the Dnieper River, so that all of those areas are Zaporizhia and Kherson areas. I think that would make sense that not happen. So if you like these videos, please give me a like, a subscribe, click the bell for notifications, or you can also follow me on Rumble with this address below. Yeah, and so I think that I hit it pretty good in my previous video leading up to this, kind of what's going on here. There's a lot of pressure from the Congress and other sources to make very radical moves on the thing, and these sanctions. But I think Trump himself realizes, I believe, that going full bore with 100% or higher tariffs on these countries, essentially embargoing trade in return for them buying oil, might actually lead to consequences that you don't want. Remember, when you're president of the United States, I don't think you want to admit your weaknesses. I mean, if you do have a weakness, you don't want to admit it. So he can, brush off the BRICS nations and saying, well, they can't do anything. I can hit them with 100% tariff and they'll yield to anything I want. I don't know if that's actually true, actually. I mean, that may be. We'll see what happens. But so far, the reaction from what I've seen from India on going to 50% tariffs is they're just kind of shrugging it off and saying they're not going to back off. And looking at the oil markets, I see no sign at oil that oil prices are surging due to them rushing into the non-Russian oil markets to buy up enough oil to replace the Russian oil they're taking, which is considerable. The same thing for China. And I'm sure that there's been with China, there's been a lot of conversations, around these topics that they're not going to discuss publicly. Because one thing, you don't want to create a crisis when you don't have to. So I think that we're making some progress. And I think the thing might come to an end. But there's some very interesting things I think that Putin did, and I have to admit he was fairly clever the way he did it. Is that he states that things like there wouldn't have been a war if you'd been president, Mr. Trump. It wouldn't have ever happened, and which I tend to agree with that. And Trump says that I tend to think it maybe not for the exact reason that he seems to be implying. That is to say, I don't think he would have mishandled it so bad that it would have led to that. I mean, I think that the dedication that the Biden people seem to have to the whole Ukraine project, I think was so great that I think that he was unwilling to bend at all on the subject. And remember that if the Ukraine had made the deal that Russia had wanted before the war broke out, that Russia wouldn't occupy any of Ukraine, and all the casualties wouldn't have happened. So that's kind of the way I see this situation. It looks like for now Trump has found a way to avoid putting these draconian sanctions on, and the 25% on India, I think, was also as much about issues he was having with the negotiation with them on tariffs and trading rules, as well as the oil. It was a mixture. And a lot of what we're doing with China, apparently we're still trying to figure out if we can somehow get them from sending precursors that lead to fentanyl. And I don't know a lot about those chemicals either, so I'm not going to get too much into it. I do ask the question, why would China be willing to incur any kind of significant tariff over providing that if there's any easy way for them to control it? My guess is that these are chemicals that, while they can be used for fentanyl, probably they can be used for other pharmaceuticals, and the corrupt organizations, I'm diverging a little bit, in the South America are probably diverting a portion of what they're getting to the cartels, either due to bribes or blackmail, and that may be what's really going on. But then, or it could be a sinister plot to actually kill Americans. But the Americans they're killing aren't the ones they would really like to do to damage the country fundamentally, right? From the moral point of view, they're human beings, but they're not exactly our best and brightest, so to speak. So I don't think that's who they'd want to eliminate or mess up if they were really targeting Americans in general. But I diverged on that. But again, like I said, these kind of discussions with China are going on, and the oil bought from Russia, and the fact that they've also sent dual-use stuff that was probably sanctioned to Russia also, is a factor, I think, in the negotiations. But there's also a desire to maintain a trading relationship. At any rate, that's kind of the way I see this. The other thing I thought that Putin did that was kind of clever at the point at the end is he mentioned that there'd been significant progress made unless basically the Ukrainians throw a monkey wrench into it and torpedo the project, which is a point too that Trump mentioned in his interview with Sean Hannity, which is also worthy to see if you have a chance to view it. Because he's pointing out that ultimately what he's setting up the framework for a negotiation for a follow-up meeting, but Ukraine has to agree to it for it to work. Otherwise, they might say no. And as I said in my previous video, that's kind of my guess, is that they probably will say no. But maybe I'm wrong about that. I don't know. I mean, obviously those conversations are ongoing, and it probably have happened after this meeting. And so we'll have to see where that all goes. But I think that where the war could end, though, is I think Russia could be on the verge of actually taking the territories that they actually want to take. I mean, if they can take Potrovsk and some of these other cities there, which are the basic Ukrainian defense line, then there's not a lot to stop them from moving on to the boundaries of Donbass. And I think that may be where they want to call it quits. I don't think they want to occupy. I keep saying, that Russia wants to occupy all of Ukraine. They want to totally conquer Ukraine. And I honestly don't think Russia wants to actually occupy Western Ukraine and have an ongoing civil war that would go on for years. and would create additional complications because of the obvious human rights violations that would entail. And it would, they'd still be in the international doghouse perpetually there. So, and it'd just be too costly, I think. The open war, conventional war, is something you can deal with a lot easier than a guerrilla war, really. That can be an ongoing nightmare. And I think that, at least I think that's my guess on it. I could be dead wrong, but notice that most of the talking heads on TV are on the other side of the issue, saying that that's the issue. But I keep seeing they're talking about Russia in ways that sounds like they're talking about the old Soviet Union. And of course, I'll agree that Lavrov, in my opinion, I give him a big demerit for showing up with a USSR T-shirt. Or, come on, dude, what a fool! I thought this guy was supposed to be a sophisticated diplomat. I'm beginning to wonder about that one. But maybe Putin suggested as a practical joke or something. You never know. But anyhow, so that's kind of my spiel on that, and we'll go on and see. But I thought that President Trump looked pretty good in his interview with Sean Hannity afterwards. He looked refreshed, calm, confident. So I think he came through this thing pretty well, and I think he's delayed these sanctions that the Congress is trying to dream up for a period of time, hopefully, in order to, because after all, he wants the money from the tariffs. He doesn't want to have a trade embargo with these countries. He wants them to be trade under certain conditions, and he wants the tariff money to help pay for his big, beautiful bill project, right? And to get through it and not end up creating a big deficit problem. Okay, enough of that, but that's my main topic. I will go on another thing. I know we noticed we had a pretty bad producer price index number of 0.9%, which was way above, I think, the analyst expectation of 0.3%. And a lot of it, I understand, was in the service arena. And there's various special areas, but it didn't seem to be primarily tariff related, although maybe somewhat. But a lot of it, I think, is probably due to the crackdown on illegal immigrants, in my opinion. I mean, I'm not sure, but I think it was in the services area. And where are there a lot of illegal immigrants, right? I mean, they're certainly not in the high-tech region, right, for the most part. So what I'm saying is, if the illegal immigrants have either been deported, self-deported, or simply not working because they don't want to get caught and getting in trouble and deported, if they're laying low, and I've heard that some of the farm workers are complaining about the lack of these people showing up, what you're going to have is well, they're going to bring in legal Americans to do the job, and they're going to want more money. And so there, voila, there's your increased producer price index, perhaps. That's just a guess, but not an economist or a member of the Federal Reserve Board, but that's my commentary on it. I mean, the thing is, it's a good thing to achieve, getting these criminal illegal aliens out of the country, and maybe anybody that's here illegally shouldn't be here. But there's a downside that we were so dependent on them at this point that it's hard to solve the problem, let's put it that way. So focusing on the criminals is obviously the key thing, and we'll see what happens. But in the process of catching criminals, they catch other people, and apparently they're just enforcing the law where they find it to be enforced. So that's my thought on that. And finally, I'll make a comment from my last video that looks like we're doing pretty good on our crackdown in D.C., and the Democrats seem to be opposed to this for some reason, but as if it's some kind of a constitutional problem. But in reality, I think they're afraid that it's going to show that with a little bit of effort, you could actually reduce the crime significantly. And while they're right in one sense that the crime rate has been coming down, it's come down to a very high and unacceptable level. And so it looks like this deployment of federal resources and National Guard is having an impact. So at any rate, we hope, but when the Congress gets back after its 30 days is up, well, we'll see what happens there. Hopefully they don't reverse the program and mess it all up again, but at least I guess we can show the contrast perhaps. So I'll be wrapping this one up for now and posting on YouTube and Rumble as always, and the address of my social media accounts are in the description below. And I post comments most frequently on X. If you follow me on there, I do a lot of kind of little comebacks to the various Democrat posts and so forth, as well as a few original ones and, of course, my videos. So all for this time.